All right, cool. So Michael Watson from Apollo. What I'm going to be talking with you about today is really opening up a little bit more about the community MCP server we've been building. So we've been doing a lot of experimentation, looking at different architectures, different things. There's actually a talk from my colleague Amanda at the New York event we had just a couple nights ago where she kind of overviewed what she was doing. So I'm going to go through some similar content, but what we actually did is we both designed different ways of building this MCP server. We actually have picked 3 different architectures of what we've been experimenting, and I'm actually going to uncover the hood of how we deployed that MCP server and what it looks like to update tools and everything inside of our community MCP server. So let me get my little timer started because I forgot to just put that on the side. Okay, so first, has anyone heard of Railway before? Couple hands, more hands should pop up. Railway is a great development, deployment framework, cloud, I don't know what you call it, but I love Railway. They're great, should definitely use them. So we use Railway actually to host our MCP server. This is actually the project we have everything in, and I'm showing this just to give you a little flavor of the different services we've tried deployed. So we've actually worked on what it's like to build a REST API that exposes Supabase and some other aspects around it. We've tried building our own little GraphQL server, see what that looks like. We've gone through deploying different architectures of some of the pieces of the Apollo puzzle and what all that is together. But today, we're going to focus on this little MCP server. This is actually the community server. So this is the URL that's been popping up on all the other slides and everything like that. If I copy this URL, for example, and I'm going to open up VS Code. I use the command palette a lot. You're going to see this pop up. This is called the command palette in VS Code if you're not familiar with it. I find a lot of people aren't, but it's basically the quickest way to find anything for any extension stuff inside of there. And I also like to lean into VS Code. I use these tasks because then I can put things like I want to run the MCP inspector just in a little task. So it just pops up, runs. Beautiful. Love it. And now what we can do is we can paste in that URL, type in MCP, connect, and these are all the tools that are available in our MCP server that's running right now, right? Submitting the submission talk, getting a talk that you had, updating the talk. We are working on authentication as the next step. We actually have an event on our calendar that's going to be virtual where we're going to talk about how we're building auth into this. So if you're interested in that, check it out. It's coming in a couple weeks. But for today, I'm going to talk through really what our development workflow is here and how we have this hosted, right? So it's like, cool, we got this thing hosted on Railway. We can connect to it, but like, show me the details, right? So let's actually dive into that. Before I go to that, this is the repo. So if you went to my GitHub, in there, this is actually what's connected to that Railway service. So it's very simple of what's in here. Now, I've made some changes and started to kind of upgrade some things. So the project I'm going to show is kind of like the vNext branch of this. But just clicking this real quick, one of the things we do with the Apollo MCP server is we ship it as a Docker image. So really all we have is we have a configuration file that's associated with the Docker image, and that's it. It's a real simple deployment. We're just deploying that right there. And then we have some configuration that connects things together, the endpoint we're pointing it at, and kind of that whole world. But really not a lot here. One of the really nice benefits about the Apollo MCP server is it's just a binary that's built in Rust. So I'm not actually writing any code or anything like that. I'm really just leaning into my GraphQL API and what's in there. So we've designed everything behind this MCP server, all the tools, all of that. It's just a GraphQL API behind the scenes. So let's go to VS Code and actually look at some of the code that's inside of here. So I've definitely added some stuff in this project. You know, I have something that's like a local configuration where I'm pointing kind of at some local resources. And I have some extra files in here that let me do a couple extra things. So I'm going to run a command real quick that's going to start everything up. And this dev command is actually using Rover, which is the CLI for Apollo. So I'm kind of now expanding into a little bit of the pieces of what Apollo ties into this MCP server. And the first thing is you'll see kind of these 3 tools that loaded up. Those are the same tools that was deployed out there. But what we're going to talk about is what does it actually look like to look at adding a tool in this, right? So we have that server deployed, but what happens when we want to update a tool? And I think one of the things that's really important, I mean, we've learned this from various softwares in the back or behind us, right? Like I think mobile is a great example of this. What happens when you want to make an update to one of your tools, and what do you do around that, right? If you think about traditional software, we're shipping some code, and then that code updates, right, in the App Store, whatever it is, and then it becomes available. So I want to show you the Apollo way that is what we built into this server. So I have everything running locally. So I got my MCP server, I got everything in this dev environment, and it gives us a couple things. One, it gives us this little sandbox that lets us test our GraphQL operations in the background. So our MCP server is essentially just exposing GraphQL operations as tools. And I'll show you what that kind of looks like in a second. But going back to MCP server, I'm going to change this to be just localhost. Okay, so we can see we're now connected to that server that's running inside of there. And just to show you some stuff works, I had this there so I can copy this submission token from a fake submission. And I can put this in here, run this tool, and here's some data. So this was the submission that was sent. It's obviously a fake submission, but this is now really dripping in. If you haven't been familiar with this tool, so this is the Model Context Protocol /inspector. This is kind of what I think of as like your developer tool for what are the tools in the MCP server you're developing, all the other things. You know, there's a lot of things depending on what you're trying to build. Elicitation is a new thing that's pretty hot. Sampling's pretty cool. But this is kind of like that development environment. I wanted to just open up that box for us. So we have our MCP server running locally. We have all of our development tools kind of running locally. Everything's ready. And now when I want to add something, the way I designed this graph, this is a little bit of an iteration from what Amanda, my colleague, talked about in her talk 2 days ago. I built everything with Apollo connectors, basically connecting to a REST API that we had built, and then Supabase directly. So Supabase, one of the nice things about it, you know, you think of it as kind of as like a Postgres database. They also host Postgres, which is like REST on the end of Postgres. But it's basically a server that gives you some really nice REST API semantics for anything you put in that table. So we can connect to a REST API of some code that we have for some special logic or whatever. We can connect directly to Supabase's REST APIs inside of there. And one of the things I added was the ability to get some events. So this is one of the things Apollo we have. It's called Apollo connectors. It's a really easy way for you to take a bunch of different REST APIs and kind of make a GraphQL API. This, if you haven't been familiar with GraphQL before or anything like that, this is definitely something I would recommend checking out as getting started easily. We do also have a lot of things. So sometimes you want to write some custom code. That's what Amanda talked a little about in her talk using Apollo Server. Not that word, it's over template. We have a bunch of templates in various languages that you could use. One I'd like to call out specifically is Strawberry with Fast API. It's a Python GraphQL server. Shout out to Patrick Arminio, a great community member in that, but I know there's a lot of Python developers. This is an easy way if you want to mix and match things, but how would I take, you know, all those Python libraries that are kind of in the AI space right now and start using them in a project like this? So we've added this get events thing onto our graph. And what I want to do is I want to create a tool that really helps people submit their talks. You know, one of the things I think about when I go submit my talk, I go and start talking with like Claude or one of my other AI agents of like, well, what do you think about this? Like, is that going to work? Like trying to have a conversation to get my talk accepted. And one of the things that would help with that is if we exposed what were the talks we accepted, right? The last 3 events, what were the things we did? So that's what we're going to do. We're going to add that tool live right now to this thing that's running, okay? So I'm going to come back over, and we're going to look at just the terminal window. This is what it looks like right now. We're going to go create a tool and have everything hot reload. So I'm going to come back and we're going to look at creating an operation. So we'll start out in here. This is Apollo Explorer, and this is basically our little development environment from that thing that I had running. That little rover dev command I had running is what's giving us this right here. And what's really nice is I can start looking at, what are the things available in my graph? What is the data and those services I can connect to? So I said I want to get events, right? So I press the plus button, got events popping up inside of here. I'm just going to add all the fields because I just want everything for now. That's fine. Don't care. Just give me everything. I want to make that a tool, right? So I have get events. This is the operation name, and this is what we use for the tool name. So I can be very specific of what I want. I know because I was building this that in the get events, there was a limit. So I'm going to just set that to 3. And I'm going to say get the last 3 events and sessions. It's a lot harder typing like that than I kind of expected. So I'm just going to call it get last 3 events. And then what we can do is we can add a little comment at the top for what the tool description is going to be. And I will write that out. Oh. All right, so now we got a little bit of information. Basically, we've given a description for our talk. We've given a title. There's more we can do, but that's all we need for now. If I press the play button, executes, I get data back, everything's good. Now I just got to press this save operation. And you can see I have this MCP default tools collection. We're on a little dev environment that I'm saving this to. And that's it. So what we've essentially done is we've just defined what are the fields of information we want for our tool. This is what's going to be returned to the client. And then we've just saved it to our collection. So remember, the way we have this, and this is kind of the Apollo side of it, we can actually set up our MCP server to look at one of those collections. Anytime something changes in that, it's going to hot reload. If you notice the bottom, notice there's 4 lines now. So it had hot reloaded in the background and adding that extra tool in. And what's really cool is if we go to MCP Inspector, now I'm going to call this out. We still have the same connection we opened up at the start of it. So I'm going to press this clear. Notice over here on the side, it's got this tools list changed. One of the things about the MCP protocol is a server is allowed to create an event that says, hey, my tool list updated. We support that in Apollo MCP Server. So now when I click list tools, it's not a great screen view, but here's that get last 3 events, right? That's the tool that we just created. If I click run, there we go. There's success, information back. That was our first one right there, June 18th. We just added a tool to what we were running locally, right? And so the cool thing about this is the tool's hot reloaded. I didn't have to restart the server. I didn't have to ship or change any code or anything in that. And it gets even more powerful than that. Let's say I wanted to make a change. Like if I look at this URL, what's the LLM going to do with that? That's kind of just some wasted context tokens. In our first event, I talked a lot about how dumping just an entire REST response into the context window is probably not what you want. There's a lot of information in there that is going to cause hallucinations, other things you want to filter out. Well, we can fix that. That's no problem. All I have to do is just remove that field. Save it. That's it. That's really it. Like now, that tool is going to hot reload. And then the client, when it requests that, it's just not even going to get that field of data back. All right, so if we went back to VS Code, see there's 4 more lines that got entered in there. So that was the hot reload. Go back to Indian Inspector. I don't even have to do anything. I'm not going to change a single thing. But let's check it out. Here's our URL. I'm just going to run this tool. Open this up. No URL. So think about that. The client has its connection open, right? If you had to ship an update to your tool and you had to restart your MCP server, you're closing every connection that server is connected to, period. That's just how it works, Streamable HP. You're gonna have to close those connections for that server to restart. So you can't actually change a tool, revoke a field of data, some access in that tool. And what's really cool is we can take that even farther. I just come in here, let's go to that collection. What if someone deletes the tool, right? Oh no, we shipped that, we gotta get that out. That was a mistake. How many times have you shipped something to production and then been like, uh-oh, we gotta roll something back? Happens all the time, it's very common. I've definitely broken some things in production before. But now, if we go back to that MCP inspector and we try and run that tool's not found. Again, I never disconnected my client from the MCP server. The MCP server was able to hot reload all the tools, all the fields of data, everything that's inside of there. This is one of the reasons we kind of chose this architecture of how we started building out our MCP server for the community. You know, we're gonna try and make changes and run fast, but we also need the flexibility to start putting granularity of what our tools can do, what you should have access to and not. All right, well with that concludes my portion of the talk. If you have any other questions about Apollo MCP, how we're building the community server, please let us know. Feedback in the survey that we're gonna send out at the end. Reach out to us. You know, we really wanna help build this server and evolve it in the community. We're gonna start adding some more features that help y'all get access to the recordings, transcripts, other things like that. So any ideas you have that would make that better, please let us know.